Good evening and welcome to Ready on the Right, Ready on the Left, Ready on the Firing Line. I'm your host, Ron Schubert. Tonight we have with us Ms. Andrea Pease of San Luis Obispo, California. Good evening, Andrea. My, that's a handsome suit you are wearing. Is that Brooks Brothers?
Good evening. Please call me Andy. I bought this suit during a shopping spree at Nordstrom.
Andy it is. I asked you here tonight to discuss your work as a member of the San Luis Obispo City Council, and your campaign to be re-elected.
Thank you. Yes, I have been serving the city of SLO as a councilwoman since 2016.
As a councilwoman, what have you accomplished in the past 4 years?
I am very proud of all the bike lanes we have added around town during my tenure. I intend to add a lot more.
Is that it? That's simply not enough. Let me ask the question in this manner. In your campaign literature you list 7 priorities: economic recovery, affordable housing, homelessness, climate action, diversity, equity, and inclusion. What specifically have you, the current mayor, and the rest of the council achieved in the past 4 years in these 7 specific areas?
Not a great deal, to be honest. Keep in mind, I just created that list for my current re-election campaign. Each and every one of my stated priorities use buzzwords that pop with voters.
You are on record as saying you have plans to increase affordable housing by allowing higher density structures to be built. Would that include, for example, the now approved 7-story monstrosity at the corner of Choro and Marsh Streets?
Yes, that is a prime example. Approving that structure is something I'm very proud of. Tom and Jim are doing wonderful work.
What do you say to critics who contend the increased density will lower the quality of life in downtown San Luis Obispo, and indeed the entire city? How about those that scoff at your suggestion that such housing will be affordable? What about individuals who express concern about the ruination of San Luis Obispo's unique character, by greedy, shove 10 pounds of shit into a 1-pound bag, architecture?
Well, as a professional architect, I can unequivocally state that their concerns are baseless. I know what's best for them.
Do you happen to live in downtown San Luis?
No, I do not.
That figures. You have also made the comment that you have creatively worked with businesses, such as waiving on-site parking requirements to allow for additional outdoor seating in parking lots and spaces. The configuration of so-called parklets.
Yes, I have. I am very proud of that accomplishment. I invented the concept of parklets here in SLO. I hope to write an article about this in the Journal of Architecture.
Once more, however, there are concerns. Many wonder why the city council allows restaurants to construct overly large parklets on public land. Parklets with far greater seating capacity than their actual restaurants. In 2 cases, restaurants have been allowed to push out into the street. And I mean all of the street, including the white center lines. What's that all about?
Well, that wasn't something that we had thought of when we issued the permits. The 2 restaurants on Monterey Street are special cases.
As a professional architect, even as a dilettante professional, shouldn't you have anticipated that restaurateurs would want to make their parklets as large as possible? Wouldn't it have been logical to restrict the size of the parklets to the actual seating capacities of their establishments? Finally, just what makes the 2 restaurants on Monterey special cases?
Perhaps we should have, but we didn't. I really can't defend why we blocked off a lane on Monterey Street. It made sense at the time, but I don't recall our reasoning.
I see. Others are concerned the emergency changes made during this pandemic will ultimately be made permanent, leading again to the erosion of the quality of life in San Luis. Are you aware that back in 1968, when Mission Plaza was re-established, it followed lengthy public debate and an actual vote by the taxpayers?
I can assure you that as a professional architect, that's simply not going to happen. Things will change, even greatly, but they will become what I and other professional architects feel is actually better. We have neither the time, nor the need for amateurs to be giving us their input. Slow is getting better and better. You're just not aware that it is.
How can you say that? From personal observation, even in the last 10 years, San Luis is fast losing its unique character, particularly in its downtown. Just look at Monterey Street. Why did the city allow such out-of-scale buildings? Why give up parking spaces for such grand sidewalks? Are you secretly planning to close off Monterey Street from Osos to Mission Plaza? If you are, why not be open about it with the taxpayers?
Again, I would remind you that I'm a professional architect. Here locally, I began with the city's largest development firm, RRM, where I worked for years. Now I sort of have my own firm, Balance Green Consulting.
That does nothing to answer my question about the lessening quality of life in San Luis. Anyway, you keep mentioning that you're a professional architect. That raises the question, why would a practicing architect even be on a city council? Particularly an architect with ties to a major development firm? That would seem to be a serious conflict of interest, especially given the amount of questionable development going on in a place like San Luis right now. At the very least, it would require any practicing architect to recuse themselves from a number of key votes on issues that seriously impact San Luis. Those are the very issues that all city council members should be voting on.
All I can say is that I ran in 2016, and I actually won, due largely to votes from transient Cal Poly and Cuesta students. I didn't expect to win, but I did. My business partner was really happy about it too. We considered it a win-win.
You say you now own your own consulting firm, Balance Green Consulting. It sounds to me as if you have positioned yourself well to cash in on new construction, and particularly on retrofits which won't be allowed the use of clean burning, abundant, inexpensive, natural gas to be used for heating and cooking needs. Once again, this makes me wonder why you're even allowed to be on the city council?
As I said earlier, I was duly elected to the office, largely by transient voters, college students.
What was your vote on the recent San Luis all-electric energy policy?
As a professional architect, I recused myself, of course.
Yet you're still well positioned to gain monetarily, based on this silly new policy? Do you care at all that it will make it more expensive for people to live in San Luis? That it will most harshly impact those that can least afford more costly forms of energy?
Yes, you can say that. I am trying to save the earth. I cannot worry about higher utility bills.
I want to ask you about the recent termination of the San Luis Obispo Cultural Heritage Committee chairman. You serve as the city council's liaison with the CHC. I think it's fair to say you were the one who coordinated the chairman's firing. A dismissal based largely on complaints by two local development firms. Your former employer RRM, and another firm, 10 Over Studio, which you had previously worked with in your role as a professional architect. While there is no question the ousted chairman can be arrogant, obnoxious, and more than a little ignorant at times, were you really a wise choice to coordinate him being canned, given your own background? This seems to be one of those conflict of interest matters you should have recused yourself from.
I really cannot comment.
Really? Moving along, I think perhaps the most troubling matter surrounding you being a member of the San Luis City Council, is that you're an activist. Along with the mayor and the rest of the city council, you have actually encouraged BLM protests which have taken a serious toll on San Luis and its reputation, over this past summer. You actually appear to condone the rudeness, bullying tactics, and violence of BLM and their associates. How could you all do this? It's making San Luis Obispo a destination for nasty, dangerous people.
While it's true that I have encouraged and facilitated the BLM protests, I wouldn't say they have taken a serious toll on the city. They are peaceful protests after all.
What planet do you actually live on? The protests have hardly been peaceful. That's outright canard. You and the rest have emboldened the protesters, who often act in threatening, bullying, dangerous manners. A far cry from peaceful behavior, indeed. You're doing all of this during a time when the mayor and city council of San Luis should be providing strong, reassuring leadership for all residents of San Luis. Instead, you share a bunker with Harmon and the others. Rather than leading, you remain silent, because you don't want to harm your chances at being re-elected.
When it comes to politics, being re-elected is the name of the game. Now that I have my own consulting firm, the influence I have as a councilwoman is more valuable to me than ever.
Your husband is a physician. You already live an upper-class lifestyle, with obviously little connection to the less fortunate. Just how much is enough, Andrea?
I am largely a dilettante professional architect. Influence and image is largely what I seek, as my husband already obviously brings home the bacon.
What exactly do you want to turn San Luis into? What's your plan?
I want to help slow transition from being a part of capitalism, to a socialist community, and ultimately to full communism. I would like to turn Slow into a Marxist mecca of sorts. An ongoing West Coast center for social justice protests. Given our central location, we can draw protesters from LA, to the Bay Area and beyond. Wouldn't that be great?
Has socialism or communism ever worked well in any country in the world?
Not that I know of, but Heidi and I think that Slow could be the first. We can begin by closing the local jail and the California Men's Colony. The downtown courts building as well.
What does that have to do with communism?
I'm not sure, but after we fully defund law enforcement, there will be no need for courts, a jail or a prison. Those facilities can then be used to house a liberal arts college, offering programs in climate action, diversity, equity, and inclusion studies.
Why would you even say something like that? Do you have any real idea what you're talking about?
I really don't know. I just know my husband and I want to live in a Marxist mecca. Most parts of the US would dismiss such plans, but we feel there is a real possibility here in Slow. Just look at how the city has changed along these lines in the past 4 to 5 years.
Why on earth would you want to live in a communist society? Historically, people have given up everything to flee communism. Never mind. Oh look. It appears that we're out of time. Until next week, this is Ron Schubert for Ready on the Right, Ready on the Left. Ready on the firing line. Keep them all in the 10 ring. Good night.